Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Okay, we're going to read Bill Cooper's Behold a Pale Horse, Chapter 13. Here we go. Chapter 13, Treason in High Places. The United Nations Treaty and the United Nations Participation Act versus the sovereignty of the United States of America. At the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention in September 1787, Benjamin Franklin was asked, "What have you wrought?" He answered, "A republic, if you can keep it." The United States Constitution, Article 6. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. The senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support the Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Have we already joined a one world government? U.S. sovereignty, fact or fiction? The executive, judicial, and legislative branches of the U.S. government have followed the policy that the United Nations Treaty approved under the UN Participation Act of 1945 in behalf of the United States of America by Harry S. Truman and the United States Senate, which treaty supersedes the United States Constitution under the terms of Article 6 of the United States Constitution. The Council of Foreign Relations created the United Nations. Their member agents, Alger Hiss and Leo Pavlovsky, did the paperwork, but the honors went to a special committee appointed by President Roosevelt to draw the first draft of the charter. The members of the committee were Sumner Welles, Isaiah Bowman, Hamilton Fish Armstrong, Benjamin Cohen, and Clark Eichelberger, all members of the Council of Foreign Relations, and members of a secret order of the quest called the Jason Society. The charter was rushed through the U.S. Senate without printed copies to guide the senators. It was explained to them by Russian-born revolutionary Leo Pavlovsky. The charter conferred no real power on the General Assembly. All the power was in the Security Council, where the veto was. The Senate would not have ratified the charter except that the American delegation had a right to veto if our interests were threatened by action of other members. Included in this charter was and is Article 25. Member nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accordance with the present charter. No restrictions, no reservations. This is all of Article 25. Note the word present, indicating that there might be other charters. The veto was a hindrance to world government. It had to be circumvented. In 1950, the General Assembly, without any legal authority, met and adopted what they named the Uniting for Peace Resolution. This greatly expanded since that time, permitted the General Assembly to exercise the powers of the Security Council. I bet you didn't know that. The government of the United States recognizes the illegally amended charter as the law of the world, overriding our Constitution. The General Assembly has for years been making the law of the world by ratifying resolutions by a 2/3 majority vote. When the resolution is ratified, it is sent down to the chief executive of the member state, and the executive is obliged to accept and carry out the provisions in the resolution. The governments concerned must ignore, abolish, revise, and rescind laws in their territories which conflict with the resolutions of the General Assembly, and to pass other laws which will put these resolutions into force. One man, one vote comes through resolution number 1760. There are more than 2,000 of these resolutions now in effect. They are the law of the land. Our civil rights laws, the ex post facto sections of which come from the Nuremberg resolutions, our agricultural laws, our health and welfare laws, our labor laws, our foreign aid laws, all come from resolutions of the General Assembly or treaties of the UN ratified by our Senate. Any law passed in your state will be rescinded or abolished if it is in conflict with resolutions of the General Assembly. I can tell you with no reservations whatsoever that all of the intelligence organizations of the United States work directly for the United Nations in concert with the secret government toward the sole purpose of the destruction of the sovereignty of the United States of America and the bringing about of one world government. The authority cited for their efforts is Article 6 of the Constitution, the United Nations Treaty, and the UN Participation Act of 1949, signed by Harry S. Truman with the advice and consent of the U.S. Senate. This should help you understand how our laws are being made and who is making them. Ask your senators, congressmen, and state legislatures if they are aware of these facts. The following statement was made by Mr. Carl B. Ricks of Milwaukee, former president of the American Bar Association, before a Senate subcommittee which was hearing testimony on the proposed Bricker Amendment. It was entered into the House record by Lawrence H. Smith, Wisconsin, on May 11th, 1955. Congressional Record, page A3220. Statement of Carl B. Ricks, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I appear in favor of the amendments. Congress is no longer bound by its constitutional system of delegated powers. Its only test is under the obligatory power to promote human rights in these fields of endeavor: civil, political, economic, social, and cultural. These are found in Articles 55 and 56 of the Charter of the United Nations, a ratified and approved treaty. They are being promoted in all parts of the world by the United Nations. Congress may now legislate as an uninhibited body with no shackles of delegated powers under the Constitution. Our entire system of a government of delegated powers of Congress has been changed to a system of undelegated powers without amendment by the people of the United States. The authority for these statements is found in a volume entitled Constitution of the United States of America, annotated, issued in 1953, prepared under the direction of the Judiciary Committee of the Senate of the United States and under the chairmanship of Professor Edward S. Corwin of Princeton, aided by the legal staff of the Library of Congress. This is the conclusion on page 427 of the annotations. In a word, the treaty power cannot purport to amend the Constitution by adding to the list of Congress's enumerated powers, but having acted, the consequence will often be that it has provided Congress with an opportunity to enact measures which, independently of a treaty, Congress could not pass. And the only question that can be raised as to such measures will be whether they are necessary and proper measures for the carrying of the treaty in question into operation. It will be noted that one of the principal cases cited is that of the migratory bird case. These conclusions are those also of a committee of the New York State Bar Association, of which former Attorney General Mitchell and John W. Davis were prominent members. Now for some practical illustration of newfound powers under treaties of what Congress may do. Number one, it may enact a comprehensive education bill, providing for education in any state which does not provide it. In fact, it may take over all public education now provided by states and municipalities. Number two, it may enact a Prohibition Act without an amendment of the Constitution. It may enact a Uniform Divorce Act. It may take over all social and welfare services rendered by or through the states or their agencies. It may take over all commerce, all utility rates and service, all labor. The list may be multiplied extensively at your will. The new test of constitutionality will apply to all legislation by Congress since 1945, which deals with any of the 5 fields of endeavors. Any judge deciding on the validity of legislation must have two books before him, one, the Constitution of the United States, and the other, the Charter of the United Nations. If he does not find authority for the act in the Constitution, he will find it in the Charter. That is the exact situation in which Justice Holmes found himself and the other members of the Supreme Court when they decided the migratory bird case. The authority was not found in the Constitution. It was found in the treaty with Great Britain. The question to be answered is this: under which form of government do the people of the United States prefer to live? Manifestly, we cannot operate under both. Senators, the people of the United States, have given up their sons. They have given up billions of their substance. They should not be the only nation in the world to give up their form of government, the wonder of the world, to discharge their obligations to the people of the world. The Brooker Amendment, which would have changed this, was not passed. A letter to the editor. Borger, Texas News Herald, Sunday, November 11th, 1962. Dear Mr. Newby, replying to your letter October 12th, also challenge for November 1961, quoting Patrick Henry on treaties. In the first place, Patrick Henry was and is no authority on either treaties or the Constitution, and he opposed it. If it is too late to do anything about reinstating our Constitution, then why not just keep the traitorous UN Charter Treaty without more ado? Why didn't the American revolutionists think it too late or too difficult to defend their liberty? And if the highly intelligent framers of the Constitution were well aware of the death trap incorporated in Article 6, why then did they frame it? Did they not expect patriots rather than treasonous as our elected officials to honor and enforce the spirit, letter, and intent of the Constitution? I note, you say, that according to a law dictionary, the terms legal and lawful are almost one and the same. Agreed, almost, but not quite. I believe there is a fine point of difference. Taking us into the UN may seem to have been done legally by the President and Senate, but the act is still unlawful because it is unconstitutional. And the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. All renowned and genuine constitutional experts have always held that anything which contravenes, diminishes, or perverts the Constitution is null and void and of no effect. Neither the President or Senate has authority or power to change, diminish, or destroy the Constitution by usurpation, treaty, or otherwise. Only a constitutional amendment can lawfully change it. The Constitution is a contract that we, the people of the United States of America, made with one another, which sets up the machinery of government to carry out this contract, mainly for the purpose of protecting individual rights as well as state rights against the powers of government. And no public official has a right to override the provisions of that contract. To quote Norton's Constitution of the United States, its application, etc., a law of Congress to be one of the supreme laws must be made in pursuance thereof and not in conflict with the Constitution. When not made in pursuance thereof, it is, of course, unconstitutional and of no effect. And the same would similarly apply to a wonderful decision rendered by the Supreme Court or an unlawful treaty. And from Norton's Undermining the Constitution, which quotes Alexander Hamilton in number 33 of the Federalist, it will not, I presume, have escaped observation that it expressly confines the supremacy to laws made pursuant to the Constitution. And from page 21, the general government can claim no powers which are not granted to it by the Constitution, and the powers actually granted must be such as are expressly given or given by necessary implication. Anyone with the presumed intelligence to be President of the United States must know that he cannot lawfully make any such far-reaching treaty with the United Nations or any other foreign power as you envision by your language, without laying himself open to the charge of treason under Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution. Just ordinary common sense is required to know that our alleged treaty with the UN and acceptance of the all-inclusive terms of its charter by our presidents, beginning with FDR, who connived with Stalin at Yalta for the setting up of the UN in the USA, and our Senate is a violation of their sacred oath of office as per Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution. Such a treaty makes a mockery of any genuine allegiance to our flag and Constitution. A genuine American, Abraham Lincoln, said, "Worse than traitors in arms are the men who, pretending loyalty to the flag, feast and fatten on the misfortunes of the nation." Think of any truth more applicable to the present time? A number of our officials, including former Secretary of State Dean Acheson, the late John Foster Dulles, and member of our present One World Kennedy entourage, go along with the statement that the USA now has no domestic affairs. There has been a melding of our domestic and foreign affairs. Meld means to merge. Katanga province in the Congo thought she had some private affairs and rights, but the UN soon disillusioned her. Quote from SL Tribune from September 14th, 1961. UN soldiers take over in Katanga. UN troops seize Katanga's capital, Elizabethville, in a brisk battle Wednesday, and the Congo's central government proclaimed the return of that secessionist province. There is no doubt that the President of the USA and Senate have surrendered certain of our rights and sovereignty to the UN and plan still more. Any informed American is aware that Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution automatically cancels out any allegiance to the UN and its alien one world internationalism, the antithesis of constitutional Americanism founded on Washington's no foreign entanglements. And that said Republican representative form of government is the exact opposite of the UN Charter's Soviet-initiated modifications, restrictions, and reservations in its various conventions, which would nullify our Bill of Rights. Stalin, his protege, Alger Hiss, and Russian communist Pezvolsky figured largely in the writing of the UN Charter. To assume that a heterogeneous body composed of appointed representatives of foreign governments, some from crude cannibalistic so-called states and others from virulently atheistic communist states, which governments do not represent we the people, could exercise dictation and control over US is monstrous in the extreme. Lawfully or constitutionally, they may not enforce any provisions of the UN Charter against us or take any action whatever affecting the sovereign rights of American citizens. Further, the United Nations is not a lawful government in the accepted sense of the term and is not a proper body with which to make a treaty. Actually, the UN has no valid binding treaty-making power, except as the subversive one-worlders try to make it so. Quoting Norton's Constitution of the United States at page 14, a treaty is a written contract between two governments, not a motley assembly of unstable tribes or enslaved peoples calling themselves a government, respecting matters of mutual welfare such as peace, the acquisition of territory, the defining of boundaries, the needs of trade, the rights of citizenship, etc. And such treaties, even though legally made, may be abrogated for cause. Quoting Ibid, page 115, a precedent for thus abrogating a treaty made by the President, approved by the Senate, may be found as far back as July 7, 1789, when Congress passed an act to declare the treaties heretofore concluded with France no longer obligatory on the United States because they have been repeatedly violated on the part of the French government. So what about all the violations of the treaties or agreements made by the USSR, which dominate the UN? The USA is vastly outvoted in this motley aggregation called the United Nations, even as American taxpayers foot most of the bills, which constitutes constitutionally forbidden confiscation of the citizens' money, property, without just compensation, therefore. This is merely communistic confiscation. A treaty made pursuant to the Constitution becomes a part of the law of the land and should be honored, but it does not become supreme or take precedence over nor supersede the Constitution. It is not the law of the land standing alone, and no treaty or executive agreement is binding on the USA if made by the President alone, as has been done, with the advice and consent of the Senate, nor if it violates the Constitution. Actually, Article 6, instead of setting treaties on high or being a death trap, is a statement of the supremacy of the Constitution and the national government. Lawful treaties are part of, but the subordinate to, the Constitution for the simple stated provision therein that all laws and treaties must be made in pursuance thereof. Can the creature or a part become greater than its creator or the whole? Some American common sense is necessary in all this blather about the supremacy of treaties, which is promulgated largely by the one-worlders to discredit or diminish the Constitution so they can achieve their own ends. The language and intent of the Constitution and of Article 6 is clear and forthright and does not admit, in good faith, of any other interpretation. But sadly enough, it is well known that many of our highest judiciary and elected officials in this area of treason, not reason, do not act in good faith nor in pursuance of the Constitution. With reference to fourth paragraph, your letter, October 12th, Mr. Newby, that the making of treaties is without limitation, exception, or reservation, and that no treaty has ever been declared unconstitutional or invalidated or repealed by the courts or Congress in the history of this nation, I think that the foregoing invalidates your statement. As to Article 6 being a death trap, over which the Constitution gives no control or remedy other than its explicit language in 6 regarding the law and treaties, has it occurred to you that the Supreme Court has the power and authority to rule on the constitutionality of treaties, the same as on the constitutionality of any other law, treaties being merely part of the law of the land? Article 3, Section 2 explicitly states the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. To quote Norton's Constitution of the United States, page 137, when a case arises in a state court and involves a question of the Constitution or an act of Congress or of a treaty, it is the duty of the court to follow and enforce the national constitutional law. For the Constitution explicitly and emphatically requires that the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Anytime that the President and the Senate make a treaty with a foreign power, such as the UN, which infringes upon or abrogates rights guaranteed to citizens of the USA under the Constitution, the Supreme Court can declare such treaty unconstitutional, void, and of no effect. Of course, the present Supreme Court, being composed of political radicals rather than judicial constitutional experts, is not likely to take such action unless forced to do so by public opinion and demand. And so, with reference to your statement and printed challenge for November 1961 to the effect that under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution, such treaty as with the UN can be made without restriction, limitation, exception, or reservation, irrespective of the fact that it contravenes, violates, infringes, or alienates every article of the Constitution. All that is necessary is for the President and Senate to ratify any treaty, and it is in force. The above article and clause likewise does not stand alone, but must be construed in the light of the entire Constitution. Your interpretation is not only to make idiots of the founding fathers and framers of the Constitution, but to say that regardless of the solemn presidential oath of allegiance required by Article 3, Section 2A, regardless of the supreme sovereignty of the U.S. Constitution, and in violation of the explicit language contained in Article 6, i.e., this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties under the authority of the United States, as well as all authoritative rulings by genuine constitutional authorities to the effect that anything which contravenes the Constitution of the USA is null and void, including any such acts by the Congress. Despite all of the foregoing, I reiterate that your interpretation would claim that there is absolutely no constitutional safeguard for the American people against treasonous treaties, which gives aid and comfort to our enemies, as per Article 3, Section 3. Your interpretation would give complete immunity to the maker of such treaties. It would constitute changing the Constitution by usurpation. in violation of the intent, spirit, and letter of the Constitution as a whole. The president obviously is not a free agent by virtue of Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, to make any sort of treaty he would like, but is bound down by the chains of the entire Constitution. Nothing else makes any sense. His treaty-making acts are subject to review by the courts. True, we should demand rescinding of the action by both Senate and Harry S. Truman in signing the UN Participation Act of 1945 in behalf of the USA. This would put the world on notice that we were once more honoring our own Constitution, Charter of Freedom, as the supreme law of the land and reinstating it to its former proper supreme position, as well as reclaiming our sovereignty as an independent republic in accordance with our Declaration of Independence. There is not, nor ever will be, any true peace, freedom, safety, or security of the American people under the alien UN Charter. There is no substitute for American independence. Many men have died and worms have eaten them for a far lesser cause. And so, Mr. Newby, you and I do have one primary objective in view: get the US out of the UN and the subversive UN out of the USA. Most sincerely yours, Marilyn R. Allen. I guess that just about covers the UN Charter versus US sovereignty hoax. No one should ever be able to bullshit you on this issue again. Your job now is to make sure your congressmen and senators are educated on this issue. Get to work now. That is the end of chapter 13 of Behold a Pale Horse. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Leave any comments below. Anything you want to add.